Slime Rancher was released on August 1st, 2017 to an incredibly good reception. The game spent a year and 7 months in early access, and to current day has sold over 3 million copies. On Steam alone it has over 53,000 reviews with a 97% positive rating, ranking with games like Dishonored, Half-Life 2 and Stardew Valley. Over its lifespan it's had multiple free content updates and plenty of attention to bug fixes. I'll start by saying that if you haven't played Slime Rancher yet, I do highly recommend it. I will be talking in detail about both the story and the mechanics. I personally feel that this game works well if you've heard a lot about it or if you go into it blind, but for those who prefer to play games blind, this is your spoiler warning if the video length wasn't enough. The game itself is very simple on the surface. You play as Beatrix LeBeau, a young woman who has left Earth behind to live on a ranch on an unnamed planet 1,000 light years away. This planet is colloquially called the Far Far Range by its inhabitants. The Far Far Range hosts an adorable set of creatures known as slimes. These slimes are able to produce plorts as a byproduct of their digestion cycle, which have many uses for the people back on Earth. Slimes are unable to produce plorts outside of their natural atmosphere on the Far Far Range, so corporations have sent people there to harvest and deliver them from specially maintained ranches. The ranch, as it's simply called, was left in disrepair for Beatrix by a man named Hobson. This is where you start the game. Now this is my first attempt at a serious YouTube video, and more are coming. If you do go on to enjoy this, please like and subscribe, it took a lot of work. I also stream regularly on Twitch with links down in the description. Thank you very much for watching. Slime Rancher is a bit of an odd game to break down. It's simple in concept, but because of the different elements at play throughout the game, actually analyzing it as a whole can be a bit difficult. I'm going to be discussing the game based on how I played it, and how I think the game is most natural to play in terms of priorities, exploring and ranching slimes first, experiencing the stories and emotional beats second, and playing with the late game content last. I'll be doing the free content updates after the base game, though I should note that all of the added content flows nearly seamlessly into the base game, to the point that you may not know on a first playthrough that it's extra stuff. Likewise, the late game content can be accessed early on if you know what you're doing, however it's not necessary and it adds a lot of complexity to the game for those who are left wanting more. I think that most people won't get into the late game mechanics, which is a shame because they're really well implemented. Luckily, I don't actually have to guess, because according to Steam achievements, only half the players will touch on the mechanics, and only a quarter will get around to playing with them much past that. The game's story is extremely non-intrusive. It's easy to miss if you're used to games that force the stories on players through linear means. If you want to experience it, and I wholly recommend that you do if it interests you at all, then you'll need to keep up on Star Mail and explore to find notes as you play. The ranch on launch is empty except for one corral. You start outside of your new home with a couple of carrots and your first new friend, a pink slime, in front of you. The game's tutorial shows up on the right hand side with a checklist of things for you to try, giving you the basic information for how to play the game. If you've played any first person shooter games recently, the controls will come naturally, and if you haven't, this would be a great game to learn in. Your interactions with the world are limited to begin with. You can move around, jump, and use your newly acquired backpack to suck up and shoot out slimes and items. The pack has 4 available tanks shown at the bottom of the screen, which you can select with the corresponding number key. Each tank can currently only hold 20 items or slimes. After getting used to the controls, you'll probably notice a large double-screen device near the entrance to the ranch. This is the Ranch Exchange. Here you can get your first quest from Thora, an elderly rancher who trades a bit of everything based on what you have available. From here you can head out into the Far Far Range for the first time. Just outside of the ranch is the Dry Reef. It's a location described as a coral-encrusted ocean floor that now basks under a golden sun. The area is characterized by tall coral columns and open coral nodes that spawn slimes. The area has spawn locations such as nests which spawn chickens, trees that harbor fruit, and vegetable patches scattered throughout that will be used for the rest of the game. Exiting into this area also unlocks the second Slimepedia entry, which can be accessed from the escape menu or by pressing F1. The Slimepedia is a general codex that provides additional information to any place, resource, or slime that you come across. To get the entries for slimes and resources, you only need to suck them into your backpack once. Locations are added automatically. The information the Slimepedia has can be as simple as in-game lore and as practical as a slime's favorite food or tutorials. The first area of the Dry Reef is filled with newly spawned pink slimes. Pink slimes will eat anything and everything, and as they do, they will leave behind pink plorts. These plorts can be collected to be sold later on. Using the backpack, you can actually capture some of the slimes themselves to put in your corral back in the ranch to farm them for their plorts. Along with the pink slimes is the first note from Hobson explaining that he was the previous owner of the ranch that he's left for you. He leaves a general paragraph explaining that he loves adventure and that he's taking one last trip around the far, far range before he leaves. He tells you that he'll drop notes around for you to find. There are two other types of slimes introduced in the Dry Reef, the tabby slime and the rock slime. Each of these slimes are very simple in nature but introduce two important concepts. They each will only eat from one of three categories of food: meat, veggies, or fruit. From these categories, they have one particular food that is their favorite. The rock slime will only eat from the veggie category, with their favorite being the heartbeat, and the tabby will eat only from the meat section, with their favorite being stony hens. I skipped over the pink slimes to grab some tabby slimes and some rock plorts. Slimes aren't just limited to eating food. When a slime eats a plort from another type of slime, they become largo slimes, taking on characteristics from each. By giving the tabby slime rock plorts, they become much larger. They get the blue color and the rocks on their back while still keeping the kitten-like characteristics that they exhibit. Each largo is different and predetermined based on the two mixed. Largos require larger corrals as they can jump higher, and they can be more dangerous as they get attacks and attributes from the slimes fused. While the tabby slimes are harmless, the rock slimes do a rolling attack that can become stronger when they are largos. One major benefit of largo slimes over the normal ones is that they have the favorite foods of both slimes. This means I don't have to worry about raising chickens to get tabby plorts. The second benefit is that when you feed a largo, you get one of each plort, two of each when they're fed their favorite food. There's a lot of information to take in the early steps of Slime Rancher. Though many of the concepts are easy to understand, the amount of them and the way they can interact with each other provides a level of depth to the gameplay that isn't apparent at first glance. The way that this information has been given to the player is supernatural and easy to digest. Aside from the initial tutorials, the pop-ups happen after you make a decision to do something, explaining what to do with your new items or giving you a bit of information on a new slime. This allows the player to explore and have agency within the tutorial section of the game, rather than being guided down a specific tutorialized route. Depth of gameplay is the player's ability to, or number of ways a player can address a situation with the tools available to them. This is loosely measured by the number of systems that are in place, how many ways a player can approach a situation, and how the understanding of one can affect the other. Slime Rancher is a game that has a lot of really simple premises that, once understood, can be used to interact with each other to make a much more complicated game. In just this early set, on top of the gameplay controls, we've learned a lot in a short amount of time. We know that slimes and food will spawn around the world. When a slime eats food, it creates a plort. Certain slimes will only eat certain foods, and they can eat plorts from other slimes. When a slime eats a plort, it grows into a new slime with a mixture of food preferences, abilities, and plorts. This very basic map opens up more possibilities than each unit offered on its own, and it's just the foundation for what will come. Back on the ranch, we can get to the actual ranching of slimes. Around the ranch are plots which can be developed into specialized zones. Corrals are one type of plot where the slimes are housed. They are made of translucent one-way walls that you can shoot slimes into, but that they can't escape out of. Once you've got your slimes safely put away in their new home, you can upgrade the corral by activating the upgrade menu at the corner. The upgrades cost new bucks, which you can get by selling plorts at the plort market. There are various upgrades to the corrals, such as higher walls and air nets which stop slimes from jumping out, music boxes which keep them happy, and automation upgrades which feed slimes and collect their plorts while you're away. The other kind of plots that you can buy are gardens, silos, coops, ponds, and incinerators. Gardens and coops are where you grow food for your slimes. Silos are where you store extra materials, and the others are living areas for specific slime types. Once nighttime comes, a new kind of slime comes out. These phosphor slimes can fly for a short while, love fruit, and die in the sunlight. Though you can sleep through the night, Beatrix is able to stay up indefinitely, which is unusual for these kind of farming or ranching games. If you go to your house, you can sleep until 6 a.m. the next day. You can also read your star mail here. The first letter you have is from the company that sent you out to the far, far range, 7Z. You get your second letter at noon on the first day from one of Beatrix's relations back on Earth, Casey. Casey will ask about how it felt to sleep for a whole year, something I could certainly use on your trip to the far, far range. Casey is our only contact back on Earth aside from the company, and they clearly have a close relationship with Beatrix. As we travel through the far, far range, we'll periodically get letters from Casey, who we'll come back to later on in the video. Now that we have some money coming in from our new friends, we can buy some backpack upgrades. These upgrades include larger health and energy pools, expanded backpack tanks raising the limit from 20, a water tank, and arguably the most interesting of all, a jetpack. The jetpack opens up exploration immensely. It uses the same resource pool that sprinting does, meaning you always have to decide whether or not you'd like to move faster or with more verticality. The energy pool refills after a short period of time of not being used. With the jetpack available, it becomes far more interesting to explore and push the bounds of where you can go. There are almost no invisible walls in the Slime Rancher, though in certain areas there are invisible ceilings, usually very high up and out of the way. The only obstacle to your exploration is the environment around you, allowing for a great many of self-made jumping puzzles. The jetpack is limited in height based on where you took off from, so hopping from one spot to another can be both exciting and dangerous. In this area, there are standard roosters and chickens, called hen-hens in the game. There are also another variety called stony hens, which are the favorite of the tabby slimes. The two other standout features that you're going to come across are these larger-than-Largo slimes called Gordos, and locked slime gates that require slime keys to open. Gordos are giant versions of base slimes. When fed enough, they'll explode into many smaller slimes, some reward boxes, and in certain cases, slime keys which can be used to open locked gates. The Gordos have the same favorite food as their base slime, and if you feed them their favorite food, it counts for double as much as a normal item. The reward boxes can come in two variants, normal crates that you can throw into the wall and will explode into resources and some money, and ribbon crates which will explode into decoration items. The decoration items are random ornaments that relate to various different things on the far, far range, which you can place anywhere. They'll float in place until you move them again. The two most obvious Gordos you're going to run across are the pink Gordo, which rests on its own little island in the middle of the Dry Reef. The other is a tabby Gordo, which rests at the end of the Dry Reef. If you gather up enough hen-hens to pop the tabby Gordo, you'll get a slime key as well as a teleporter which links back to the ranch, allowing for easy travel between the two areas. In the Dry Reef, there are a total of 5 Gordos for you to find and pop. Some of them are easy to spot, and others are really well hidden. In your travels, especially after unlocking the jetpack, you'll likely come across one of these small pods, which are either green, blue, or purple. These are called treasure pods, but we can't quite open them yet. They require a treasure cracker that will unlock somewhere in the mid-game. Something to note about the design in the Slime Rancher is that you're completely free to explore with the jetpack. Aside from the rare ceiling you can reach by going to the uppermost parts of the maps, there are almost no invisible walls in the game. The only limit to how far you can go is the slime sea itself. If you fall into it, you'll lose all of your items and respawn back at the house 12 hours later or at 6 AM, whichever one comes first. As we begin to explore out more and more, we have to remember to come back to the ranch occasionally to harvest our food, fill the auto feeders, and collect plorts. It's very easy to end up exploring for too long only to come back to unhappy starving slimes and rotted food. You can lose your slimes if you let them starve, and the food in the garden plorts will eventually rot away if not harvested, though they will be quickly replaced over time. With a slime key in tow, we are able to enter one of the new areas adjacent to the Dry Reef, either the Moss Blanket or the Indigo Quarry. The Moss Blanket is accessed near the Tabby Slime Gordo, and the Indigo Quarry is reached through the tunnel system closer to the ranch. We're going to go through the Moss Blanket. The Moss Blanket is accessed through a series of small islands connected by bridges. At nighttime, there are feral slimes on these islands. Feral slimes are constantly aggressive and will try to bite or eat Beatrix. In the cave to the Indigo Quarry, feral slimes will always spawn. They can be quickly avoided or calmed down by feeding them or splashing them with water. To get into the moss blanket or the Indigo Quarry, you have to open the respective slime gates. That being said, I'm going to use a bit of creative jumping to get over the moss blanket's slime gate without spending my key. Skipping over the slime gate, we are in a new verdant area. In the entrance to this new zone, we're introduced to a couple of new slimes. The puddle slime is an absolutely adorable creature that lives in and subsists off of water. It and the ash slime are the only ones that can't become largos with others. There's also a meat-eating boom slime nearby which frequently explodes, hurting Beatrix if she's caught in the blast. Along these are many of the previously encountered slimes roaming in the new zone. As we travel deeper into the forest, we find new food types, including the new fruit mint mango and the new chicken variant, the briar hen. The moss blanket is full of life and it shows. Not much further in and you start running into honey and hunter slimes. While all of these slimes are interesting for several reasons, the great variety of them means tar slimes become much more likely. Tar slimes occur when a largo eats a third different kind of plort. They're described in-game as awful ravenous rainbows. Tar slimes can be destroyed by splashing them with water or by throwing them into the slime sea. They do, however, get stronger at night, taking a second splash of water to destroy. For our ranch, I wanted to make a largo from honey and hunter slime. Their plorts are more valuable than the ones we have, and it's my favorite kind of largo in the game. The problem is that the hunter slimes are uncommon, and even when you do come across them, they have a tendency to go invisible. Luckily, as you progress into the moss blanket, there is an area called the Feral Path where there are many aggressive feral largos, including hunter largos. By feeding them, we are able to grab their plorts and bring them back to the ranch. At this point in the game, you've likely had a situation where you've accidentally launched a hen or a slime you've wanted to keep when you weren't supposed to. If that happened with a hunter slime, it can go invisible and easily be gone forever, or mix with another slime to make a largo you didn't want. By carrying a plort or two instead of slimes, you're quickly getting into the idea of efficient play. Slime Rancher is a game that can be casual or serious depending on the mood you enter it with. By getting into efficient play, you're tapping into a style of gaming more commonly expressed in factory games like Factorio, Satisfactory, or Oxygen Not Included. The idea behind efficient play is to find the shortest route to a solution within a game. By raising largos instead of individual slimes, for example, we're able to produce twice as many plorts for half the amount of food. This saves effort as well as space on our ranch, which is limited. Likewise, by finding the shortest routes and managing our inventory in a specific way, you end up being more mindful about how you're playing and why you're doing what you're doing. With honey and hunter slimes mixed, I no longer have to worry about raising hens and can get 2 hunter plorts per slime for 1 mint mango. I have a tendency to mix meat-eating slimes with veggie or fruit-eating slimes in order to avoid raising hens, which can be a little bit more complicated than growing fruit or vegetables. A note about mixing hunter slimes is that any slime that becomes a largo with a hunter slime immediately becomes feral, requiring food to calm down and become tame. Now, something that you may be wondering is what happens if you throw something into the slime sea. I personally always felt bad about this, thinking that they must die when you do. Obviously the chickens die and the fruit and vegetables are wasted when you do this. But the reason the slime sea is inhospitable is because it's a mixture of both water and slime. Slimes are even noted in the Slimepedia to travel via the slime sea, crossing vast distances quickly through the water only they could survive in. As you travel the far range, you'll get star mail from other characters on the planet. These are the few other ranchers who have come to the isolated planet for their own reasons. They are also the only people aside from Casey and Hobson that you'll interact with. You can get trader quests once a day at the ranch from one of 2 of these ranchers. The ranchers that you can interact with are Thora, Viktor, Ogden, Mochi, and Bob. They all have their own interesting personalities and self-contained stories for you to explore. With the free content updates that have come out over the years, after getting the mail and doing a request for them, you can go and visit the ranches of Ogden, Viktor, and Mochi. I'll be saving the ranches of other characters for later in the video during the story section, but know they offer an interesting and fun new experience for each one of the ranches. None of them are the same experience as the other, and none of them are the same as the base game. At this point, you've likely saved up enough money between ranching the few slimes back at home and exploration to unlock a new ranch expansion. These areas are blocked off until you pay for them. Each of these areas has a unique feature that helps them stand out. On the eastern side of the ranch, there is a cave where phosphor slimes can exist without a shield to protect them from the light, as well as a laboratory that we'll get into later. On the western side, there is a grassy area that naturally spawns and allows hen-hens to grow. Further past it is an entrance to the Dry Reef and a final ranch location, the docks. The docks have a spot where puddle slimes can live without having to buy a new plot. Each of these expanded areas contains a note from Beatrix left by Hobson. The notes give us a look into Hobson's feelings and thoughts, as well as a bit of backstory to each of the new areas on the ranch. There are 2 Gordos you can find in the moss blanket, each carrying a slime key to open up the map. There's a honey slime tucked away in a corner that requires a bit of creative exploration to find, and a hunter slime hidden and invisible among a large group of feral slimes. If you go in through the most likely first entrance to the moss blanket, like I did, you'll come across a note from Hobson telling Beatrix that when he first came here he got lost. While the player will likely have an easier time with the map left behind for them, it's still easy to get turned around, and this is a nice little hint to the one-way teleporter set up later on in the moss blanket. By coming back to the entrance of the moss blanket, you can get to an easily reached slime gate, which opens up into a small, calm area devoid of any slimes. There are collapsed structures and columns surrounding a massive gate. In the center of the gate is a shiny rainbow slime, with an arc of colored gems above it. As you look around the area, there are several stone statues with various slimes we've come across and some that we haven't. You can feed the statues the plorts of their corresponding slime, which will cause their gem on the gate to light up with a jingle. In order to get the last plorts we need to open the gate, we need to go to the next available area, the Indigo Quarry. The Indigo Quarry is the remnants of a mining project that was abandoned after it was realized that even the rare ores and minerals on this planet would dissolve if exposed to other atmospheres. When you first enter from either the moss blanket or the Dry Reef, you're introduced to rocky areas filled with boulders and crystal stalagmites. On the ranch side of the Indigo Quarry, there is a note from Hobson. He tells you that he enjoys being alone and isolated, which is why he came to the far, far range. He then hints of someone he met when he got here that changed that. The quarry is home to the rock and boom slimes. The Slimepedia entry reads, it was later discovered that the means to harvest the metals was via the rock slime plorts. Each of the plorts we've been selling back to Earth has a specialized use and function. Pink plorts are called the excellent multi-purpose generic substance used to manufacture general goods such as household cleaners and even food bases. Rock plorts make an extremely valuable metal, and even the tabby plorts have a value in performance-enhancing products used by athletes, though the entry also describes a side effect of uncontrollable butt wiggles after prolonged use. The 2 new slimes in the Indigo Quarry The 2 new slimes in the Indigo Quarry you can find are the Crystal Slime and the Rad Slime. The Crystal Slime can leave behind crystal traps which will hurt Beatrix if she steps on them, while the Rad Slime has a visible aura of radiation which will build up quickly and hurt if the meter fills out. These slime plorts are also more valuable than the initial ones, so ranching them can be worth the danger if you can manage them. While exploring the quarry, there are 2 easily found rock Gordos, 1 well-hidden rag Gordo, and a crystal Gordo. With each of the rock Gordos comes another teleporter. The one in the cave, central to the quarry, will link back to the cave on the ranch, setting up another shortcut. The one in the northern tip will link to an island where the crystal Gordo sits. The island features its own cave, as well as its own flora, coloring it in reds and oranges. If you go back and explore the Dry Reef, you may find a tabby Gordo which sits on the outside of the overgrowth. When fully fed, it will also reveal a teleporter to the Dry Reef Island called Ring Island. On this one lies the other pink Gordo holding a slime key. Once we've had our fill of exploring and exploding Gordos, we can grab the remaining plorts we need for the ancient gate and head back. With each plort inserted, the gems will all light up around the rainbow slime and a proud jingle will play as the gate creaks open, letting us into the ancient ruins. As we get to this section, I'd like to remind you that we're going back to the ranch frequently to build up our collection of slimes. Each slime has its own favorite food being grown, and they're all in their respective places. Immediately as we enter the ancient ruins, we find an orb resting on a small pedestal. Interacting with it causes a door in front of us to shift open, and another door to our side to shift closed. Throughout the ancient ruins, these orbs and shifting doors add a maze-like feel to the area. The ruins sit almost like a long, undisturbed garden, with strange open architecture built with large slabs of stone. There are multiple vertical levels that stretch in all directions to be explored. There's a flooded basement in one area, freestanding pillars in the slime sea, and greenery growing everywhere. The initial note from Hobson in this area poses some questions for the player. Who made these ruins, and why? He found the answer at least to the purpose of the ancient ruins, and challenges you to do the same. In the ancient ruins, there is a new kind of slime, the quantum slime, and its corresponding favorite food, the quantum lemon. Quantum slimes have the ability to phase to another location using a projected version of themselves that they move around them. If they want to move locations to get food, for example, they will hop around like normal, but will also just teleport there if their projection is closer. This is a massive problem for ranching, because it's very easy for them not only to escape their own pens, but also enter the others, causing a tar outbreak at the ranch. If the slimes are kept happy enough, then they'll refrain from teleportation and stay where they are. This can be achieved by keeping them well fed with quantum lemons, installing the music box feature in the corral, and by bringing them a toy to play with. In order to get a quantum lemon, you first have to find a tree with a ripened fruit. The fruit don't actually exist on this plane though, so you need to throw another fruit at it, which will swap places with the lemon, bringing it to Beatrix's dimension. This only has to be done on the wild quantum lemon trees. At the ranch when grown, the lemons will behave as any other normal fruit. The ancient ruins is a simple linear level. The start is at the south end of the map, and the exit is at the north, almost in an exact line. There is one spot where you have to fly up and open a gate, or figure out a way over it in order to progress. Other than that, it is very easy to get up from one end to the other. It's in searching for specific things and exploring around the map that the level design truly gets to shine. The two Gordos are a bit more hidden on this map. The Boom Gordo can be seen from behind, giving you an idea of where to go to feed it. The Quantum Gordo, on the other hand, is tucked away in a corner. The treasure pods in this location are also hidden away in much less obvious places, with some fun rewards. Alongside the normal ornaments you can find in boxes in this area, there are location-specific decoration you can get here called echoes. Echoes are a simple glowing light that you can find, vac up, and place anywhere like you would an ornament. They only spawn in the ancient ruins, so you have to find them here, or... At this point, you probably have met one or both of the rare slimes that can appear throughout the world at random. The lucky slime is a tabby slime that can't produce plorts. When you fire food at it, it will spit out a bunch of nubucks for you, increasing the amount with each feeding. Golden slimes are, as the name suggests, a golden slime that when shot will drop out the most expensive plorts. They actually have a favorite food that can be found in the final area of the game. When fed this, they'll give 3 plorts instead. The first time you get 3 golden plorts from a slime, you'll get an achievement as well. At the edge of the ancient ruins, there is a one-way teleporter that will take you back to the ranch. If you use it, you'll have to walk all the way back to get to the ruins again. Inside and down a ramp, there is a slime gate. Through this one, there is a long hall to a large round room which has 5 quantum statues around a large pad. Knowing how this goes, once you collect 5 quantum plorts and feed them to the statues, the pad begins to glow, and once you step on it, you're teleported to the glass desert. The ruins continue into the glass desert, but become less prominent, more scattered. There are new foods, slimes, and Gordos to find here. This is also the last area in the base game. The glass desert suits its name, as it's very much a desert with large glass structures scattered about, shooting up from the ground like flames or lightning. This zone feels very much like the culmination of all the ones prior. There is a heavy use of verticality that you got used to playing with in the Moss Blanket in Indigo Quarry, and mastered in the Ancient Ruins. Much like the Ancient Ruins, there's more of a puzzle feature, and there are lots of tucked about secrets in the buildings spread around. At a first glance, the glass desert can come across as a very one-note location, full of browns, whites, and grays. Even the grasses that grow here are dull, and the few cacti spread about are subdued in their greens. Hobson's note is much more warning than any one before it. It tells you that the glass desert is amazing, but that you'll need to be on guard and ready at all times for a potential solar anomaly. You'll know it when you see it, and when you do, seek shelter. Likely, shortly after you've begun exploring, an anomaly will occur. A red haze will fill the screen and firestorms will descend on the region. From these firestorms, ash slimes will spawn. The firestorms themselves aren't too dangerous and are easily avoided. When hit, they do very little damage, but they do shoot out fireballs that can hit you from afar. These firestorms are the reason for the glass structures that fill the region, melting the sand into glass. Around the desert are quite a few strange buds growing from the earth. They aren't interactable, but with a bit more exploration you'll quickly find out what they are for. In some locations there are more slime statues. For the first one you'll likely come across you'll need rock plorts, and luckily, nearby there are some rock slimes. Once you find and fill these statues, a nearby dried out fountain will become active again. These fountains contain ancient water, which can be swapped out with your regular water for a short period of time to grow the buds in the desert. When they're watered, the buds will bloom, bringing forth other vegetation and spawning many different kinds of slimes. Though this normally would be cause for concern by potentially creating many tar slimes, the surrounding field created by the bud damages and destroys tars. The first gordo near this fountain represents the tangle slimes, which are meat eaters. The base slimes are able to send a tendril through the ground to grab and eat unsuspecting hen-hens, painted hen-hens being their favorite. Though the gordo, much like the others, will just happily sit in your way until fed. There is no easy way back to the ranch from the glass desert without doing some slime research, so the fastest way back is to run to the one-way teleporter back in the ancient ruins. If you bring some ash slimes back to the ranch with you, you'll need to build an incinerator. The incinerator will turn any food you throw into the center into ash, which will feed the slimes. There is a somewhat evil achievement tied to this, as you may be able to guess. Now that we've traveled into the final area of the base game, I'd like to talk about the story beats along the way that I've mostly glossed over and hinted at. This is the last chance spoiler warning. I've deliberately left out some special things around the game for you to discover both mechanically as well as story-wise. This is where I break down the two main storylines of Slime Rancher. There are two ways to reach the last event which triggers the credits in Slime Rancher. Both are story-related and relevant to Beatrix, but neither are linked to the other in any way excluding the final event. The credits trigger once you've read the last star mail from Casey to Beatrix. You get this mail 6 in-game hours after reading either Casey or Hobson's last note. They aren't mutually exclusive. You can get both of all the notes in one playthrough and likely will. Both of these characters are keystone figures in Beatrix's life. Hobson's effect is obvious. He left Beatrix the ranch that would allow her to pursue the lifestyle she dreamed of. You quickly find out that Casey was someone very important to Beatrix. Their gender is purposefully ambiguous, which I think is actually a nice touch. I have some personal thoughts on each of the stories, but I'll run down each individually first, starting with Hobson. Hobson's interactions are mostly adventure related. He gives backstory to the world, his opinions, and feels all in one-page letters scattered throughout the far range. Several are simple to find, but most are out of the way and take at least a little bit of exploration. He initially is very matter-of-fact, talking about the adventure he is going on and the various bits of lore that he knows. He quickly opens up to Beatrix in his own way. My favorite early entry in the Dry Reef talks about a boot that he lost off the cliff, and then justifies it by saying that the journals won't necessarily be filled with useful information. As you progress into the moss blanket, he maintains the useful information, hinting at a way out and advising you to upgrade your equipment before tackling the more difficult area filled with large gaps and feral slimes. This is also where he really opens up to Beatrix, asking if she's ever been in love. He describes it in an odd fashion before recommending that she try it. In the Indigo Quarry, he will tell you about how the first person he ran into in his grand adventure to the far range completely changed his views on life. He liked her laugh. In the quarry, he got trapped in a cave just to get the materials to make a wind chime for Thora, and declares the whole ordeal worth it. Despite this, he found himself coming to the isolated area looking out to the stars, hinting at the itch of adventure that's been the cornerstone of his life. The ancient ruins tickle at Hobson's innate curiosity. Who built the ruins? Why? He finds himself pondering at the doors the previous inhabitants built, which closes one door and opens another. But no matter what you do, one door will always be closed. He relates this to life and important decisions, talking of the hurt you'll experience of always wanting to know what would happen if you chose the other door. He also gives tips on the phase limits and warns of the teleporter to the Glass Desert. The Glass Desert is where Hobson's story comes to a close. He warns you of the danger inherent in the desert and helps you with hints towards to how to revive it. He immediately begins pondering and explaining the world as he sees it. He talks of space and time, where you must be and how far away from the ranch you are to not be able to see the slime sea. The most important notes you will get from him are the last 4. These are at the end of the Glass Desert, in the northernmost section where the large ruin is located. He opens up by bringing back the 2-door problem which is present here. Just like before, only one can be opened and you can only go through one, leaving the other closed. This is the last part of Hobson's journey here, both as the owner of the ranch and as the final travel around the far, far range. He found the reason for the building. It can be used to travel through space and potentially even time. It would allow the user to experience nearly an infinite amount of experiences and adventure. He was facing 2 doors, the adventure of a lifetime or a life with Thora. Knowing this now, he chose which door he would walk through. Inside the ruins, he tells you that he went back to the ranch and packed his bags. He sold the ranch, gathered everything he would need for his last tour which would take you around the far, far range, and prepared to go on a journey of his lifetime. He was giddy all over, felt the power from the monolithic warp terminal, and finally stepped onto the platform. But he decided to stay. He took all his preparation and went to Thora's ranch. He knew what he wanted, and he made his decision. With his last letter, he reminds Beatrix to keep her head on straight, but sometimes to let her emotions and heart guide her. Hobson's story is very much akin to Beatrix's, and most likely your own. Throughout life, we have to make choices and live with the consequences. It's not uncommon for us to think back on the what-ifs, should-haves, and could-have-beens. There is a lot of cute characterization and genuinely thought-provoking stuff in Hobson's note if you take the time to read them. Casey is a much more domestic story. Since Casey was incredibly close to Beatrix before her big move, their messages are more intimate and personal. They begin by asking a bunch of questions, much like you would of a friend you hadn't seen for a full year. They want to know what it was like to sleep for a whole year and did you dream? What's the range like? Is it beautiful and is the air as clean as they say? They clearly miss you, but end the letter with words of encouragement. If anyone can make it on the far, far range, it's you. All of Casey's notes come in based on in-game time passing after certain events or after reading the last letter. This means you can get all of Casey's letters without having to explore at all, and that you can accumulate almost all of the letters without reading any of them. There are far fewer of Casey's notes than Hobson's, but because of how they are implemented and spread out, each one feels all the more special. You get each one of these letters because of your actions, because you chose to do something. You don't get them any other way. Casey follows up with you by letting you know that they bought a cactus off of you, in their own peculiar kind of way. They found it left over in your shop and thought it looked lonely, so they adopted it and took it home to raise, despite their apparent lack of a green thumb. The third letter confirms that Beatrix is sending letters back, but we don't know what the other side of conversation is like. We can infer what was said by the content of Casey's letters, however. They tell a couple of stories over the next 3 letters, of a big storm that rushed in, forcing the pair into a coffee shop where they bonded, telling each other of their life goals and desires. Casey confides that on the way home, the rain started up again, and you got close to them, making their heart beat faster. The Death Hike letter is Casey remembering a time that they got a true eye-opener into the life of Beatrix. They didn't realize how into the outdoors and exploration Beatrix was, and how your version of a hike was extremely arduous for them. Despite their struggle and the difference in the lifestyles, it's clear that Casey remembers this with a certain nostalgic fondness. The letter about the van tells a story of Beatrix trying to match Casey's lifestyle of being an artist, living in a shoddy van that they were trying to use to tour with. It goes out on a cute in-joke of the van still running, with the twist that it actually doesn't, because it died like a Viking when it caught on fire. The note continues to talk about events that happen in their lives, Beatrix going to Africa, and Casey spending time in LA to get stage time as a musician. They ask about whether or not they could have made their relationship work, musing on the fact that they knew one of them would have to give something up for it to work, and that something was too much to ask of either of them. Casey ended up pursuing their passion more, even though they missed Beatrix. When they learned she was going to the far, far range, those feelings were amplified. They missed Beatrix, but admit that it was easier once Beatrix had started her journey through the stars. They could focus on their own goals and come to terms with the fact that that scared them, made them sad. In the second to last letter, Casey wishes you happiness for the rest of your life. They're happy to know that a piece of them will always be with you, and they're happy to know that you'll be one of the stars that they look up to in the night. The last letter you get from Casey comes either when you've read Hobson's last note or the previous letter. They've got another tour coming up, and it seems like this one will be the one that really gets their career going. They keep thinking of you, and hope that somehow you'll be out in the crowd, and that if you are, they'll sing a song just for you. You can only really get out what you put into the Slime Rancher story. Like I said before, the game doesn't pressure the player into finding the notes or reading Casey's letters. You have to explore and search out Hobson's notes, and actively choose to stop ranching for a bit to read Casey's letters. I think this required engagement is brilliant for a couple of reasons. Because it's an active choice the player has to make, the stories never stop the gameplay's experience for someone who doesn't necessarily have an interest in the stories being told. It also means that if you decide you want to experience them, you can do so at your own pace, even after you're done exploring the game world. There's a certain excitement that comes with finding a new note or building up the understanding of these characters' situations. When a new letter comes in, it's something to be excited about, and a reason to go back to the ranch and home. But these events never force them on you. They'll be waiting there for you to go and find them when you feel like it. Because of this requirement of an active participation from the player, the level of investment you can get out of the experience is a lot higher than a story that just progressed as you played through the game. If you want the story moments, you have to go out and find them. The actual narrative of the two stories is also incredibly interesting when looked at together, since you can experience them one without the other, though that's more unlikely. It's fair to go through them individually. When you look at both of them, however, there are a lot of interesting things to talk about. Casey's story is about a person having to choose what they want in life, much like Hobson's. Each of them have goals and desires of what they want to achieve, but where Hobson's story is about choosing to live for and with someone else, Casey and Beatrix's are about choosing their ambitions and having to come to terms with their separation as a consequence of that. Hobson was on a solo journey. He enjoyed being alone and looking out for adventure. Even once he met Thora, that didn't change. It just gave him another reason to go out. He would go out and get stuff to make gifts for her, but up until the very last moment, he was struggling to decide with what he would want to do. He still enjoyed those moments of isolation, exploration, and discovery. It's not as though meeting Thora changed that aspect of him. He made the decision, by his own words, based on his emotions. It was a conscious decision to say goodbye to what could have been and move in with Thora. Casey and Beatrix loved each other, enough to maintain a long-distance relationship, but they both knew that in order to be together, they would have to change their life, goals, and ambitions. They would have to say goodbye to something that was integral to their life, much like adventure was to Hobson. And even though they loved each other, maybe even because of that, they said goodbye to what could have been. I have thought about the last letter from Casey quite a bit. It's a good letter to go off on, not only for the story, but for the characters themselves. Casey has come to terms with moving on with their lifestyle, and at this point, unless you're a speedrunner, Beatrix has spent her time traveling around to a new world, exploring, ranching, and getting to know new people around her. Sometimes in life, we have to move on from the people that are closest to us. Things won't always work out, and the friends or lovers that we find ourselves closest to today may end up with responsibilities or ambitions that mean we can't maintain those relationships. We may end up talking to them, much like Casey and Beatrix do, of the times past and what we felt back when, But things have changed. The conversation will end, and we will have to get back up and continue on with what's going on in our lives. I think I like the way this ends because it's conclusive, realistic, and optimistic. I don't think that many of us want to just end most of our closest relationships, even when things get difficult. But if and when they do have to end, this is how I would like them to, knowing that we can still talk and reminisce on the old days and that the other person is doing well, pursuing their dreams. Much like you, I have had my own fair share of splits in life. Friends, partners, and lovers have had to go their own ways while I went mine. I wish them all the best in life and sincerely hope they go on to live their lives to the fullest, however that may be for them. I imagine that you feel the same way about many of the people you've had to part ways with as well. This game about going out and exploring, playing with cute, strange slimes, manages to touch on a very human experience in a simple, emotional way. It talks about finding important people in your life who will change your course in ways you could never have expected, and having to go in different directions from some of the most important people you care about. Even now, if you've seen this video this far through without playing it, I recommend you go and find these notes and letters. They're a good read, and you'll likely have a good time along the way. Once you've gotten past the credits screen, you'll get a letter from Hobson telling you that there are 3 hidden vaults around the far range which hold the funds that he was going to bring on his space-crossing adventure. If you can find and open them, their contents are yours for the keeping. The content I call post-game material is technically available at any point. However, it's a more complex portion of the game that most players won't bother with until they've gotten to the end of the glass desert and explored most of the map. You can purchase the slime laboratory at any point in the game, but its real value comes in when you've gotten a more fleshed out ranch going. Similarly, the 7Z Corporation has some of the best upgrades in the game, cosmetic and mechanical, but due to the high cost, most players won't get very far into it. The 7Z Corporation is very simple. For an increasing cost of new bucks, you can get various upgrades, mostly cosmetic early on. The prices start reasonable, but by the end of it are extremely high. While you're wandering around the game world, your current 7Z level is displayed with your currency and time. The most important early unlock you receive from the 7Z Corporation is the Toy Store, which is installed on your ranch and gives you immediate access to slime toys, which can improve slime happiness. Each slime has a favorite toy. Some of these slime toys you can find around the world and bring back to your ranch as well, but as a tip, toys don't go through teleporters, you have to bring them back manually. Slime science, on the other hand, is a bit more complex. At the slime laboratory, there's a refinery where you can deposit materials into which can be crafted into various gadgets. You can deposit plorts, as well as specific reagents you get from 3 extractors, pumps, drills, and apiaries. Some of the gadgets you can build have to be purchased as blueprints in the laboratory, several are located in the world as treasure pods, and a few are locked behind 7Z rewards. One of the most interesting and helpful that you can see early on are the drones and teleporters. Slime science immediately changes the plort economy for the player. For example, pink plorts, which are the cheapest plort, become incredibly valuable as they are used behind many early blueprints. The pink teleporter is potentially one of the most useful gadgets you can build early on, giving the player quick access to the glass desert. Each plort in the game can be used for multiple gadgets, which have varying uses and benefits. The first things you'll be able to build are the novice level extractors, which you can place around the far range to gather various resources. Extractors require only plorts to build. Once you have them set up at gadget sites around the map, you have to leave them for 12 in-game hours. This can be passed by sleeping at the ranch. Once the time is up, the extractor will spit out resources based on what type it is. The drill will bring up ores, the pump liquids, and the apiary will bring out honey and bee-based materials. Each material or mat has its own rarity, with higher tier extractors getting higher quantities and quality of mats. Each extractor has 5 unique resources tied to it. With the combination of money and slime science, the value of building up a ranch that supports every type of slime becomes obvious. Instead of limiting players though, this ends up breeding varying levels of creativity. How you end up designing your ranch will almost always be different from someone else's, and if you go to watch other people's live streams, you'll notice almost immediately the different ways that these ranches accommodate these cute critters. There are several different types of gadgets you can build with slime science. The extractors, utilities, warp tech, decorations, and curios. Each one is rather self-explanatory. The utilities include items like the drones, which start the automation of the ranch, snares, which can be used to capture gordos, and pads, which can recover health, energy, or launch you up into the air. The decorations are decorative items that you can install that naturally occur in the world, such as the corals from Dry Reef or the glass from the Glass Desert. The curios are fun little gimmicks that serve little purpose, but can add a little bit of life and individuality to the game. Shortly after crafting your first gadget, you will unlock the Treasure Cracker upgrade. Once you've purchased this, you are able to go out and open the green treasure pods that were seen around the world. The further upgrades to the Treasure Cracker require more gadgets to be crafted. The treasure pods can contain many things, from set resources, decorations based on location, to advanced extractors and other useful gadget blueprints. Many of the pods are easily found, but just as many are really well hidden and hard to reach. To unlock most of the teleporters, you will have to find them in treasure pods. There are also two extremely useful gadgets called the Market Link and the Refinery Links, which are teleportation gadgets that provide a direct link to either sell plorts or fill the refinery. I'd describe the mid-game as having mostly explored the map and unlocked slime science, with the late game being the point at which you have reached a level of automation and have had most of the gordos popped with easy travel to all locations. By getting drones set up, which can handle one task at a time, you're able to start automating the ranch in truth. You can have 2 drones per area, and their actions can be very specific or broad. For example, you can have them collect all of the fruit in the area and deposit them into their respective auto feeders, or collect all the plorts in the area to store or sell them. These drones run on water, so you have to fuel them after a while, but it's much more preferable to having to manually fill or empty your corrals. This all affords you a bit of freedom to pursue hunting down gordos, setting up and gathering from extractors, finding treasure pods or notes that you may have missed. It also makes funding the 7Z Corporation much more manageable, as you don't have to be on top of your ranch 24/7, and there are good reasons to push through the higher levels of 7Z. Through the 7Z rewards, you are able to hit the max health and energy levels, and get the vac pack upgraded to hold 100 of an item. There are also higher tier gadget upgrades, many cosmetic unlocks, and some special unlocks like the ability to get 3 gold plorts whenever you feed a gold slime. I'd highly recommend getting this before you go to the vaults left behind by Hobson. The last gadget I want to talk about is the Gordo snares. You can make various levels of Gordo snares, which when filled with their favorite food, will attract the corresponding Gordo. The higher level traps increase the chances of getting the Gordo you want, and the highest is locked behind a 7Z reward. This means that you're able to get Gordos on your farm, or anywhere else you'd like if you put the effort in. I feel like one of the reasons so few people get into this late game content is because it's so easy to feel like you've gotten a complete experience once you've explored the majority of the map and played with the slimes to your heart's content. All of the late game slime sciences and upgrades are additions to the game that aren't necessary, but I do think they add to the game's experience. It's a bit like the iceberg effect, where most of the players will only experience what's on the surface, but for those of you who want to go deeper, there's enough interesting material and reasons to expand the ranch to make it worth it. It's one of those situations where I think the game wouldn't feel as complete without it, even if most people won't experience it. Knowing that it's there can make the game feel as large and detailed as it is. There really isn't anywhere I'd want the developers to have focused their time on instead, including all of this additional gameplay material, excepting maybe more areas to explore and slimes to play with. This naturally brings us up to the added content. The first of 3 introduced content updates was Ogden's Wild Update. This added a new area to explore, a new slime type, and a new ranch expansion. There are some requirements to unlock this area, but they are part of the natural progression of the game. The wilds are a part of the Moss Blanket, but can only be accessed from Ogden's personal retreat. To get there, you have to have the Moss Blanket unlocked, have purchased the Overgrowth Ranch expansion, and have done a trade request for Ogden. Once the requirements have been met, Ogden will invite you to his ranch via a teleporter placed outside the Overgrowth expansion. When you first arrive on his retreat, the actual ranch is blocked off via a force field. There's a trade exchange set up near the entrance that you can access to speak directly to Ogden. He explains that he bought this retreat a while back before discovering that the area was full of saber slimes, but also grew a rare fruit called a kookaduba. He describes the fruit as the most delectable, irresistible fruit in the known universe. though both the Slimepedia and even Ogden himself will say that most find the fruit to be the exact opposite, tasting like rotten cheese. Though Ogden is obsessed with the Kookadoobas, he isn't in his prime anymore and is no longer able to deal with the risk of going out to harvest them himself. The area is full of saber slimes, and they're all feral, so you have to be ready to take the challenge. In exchange for collecting the Kookadoobas, he will give you his specialized upgrade for your gardens, and for every 3 of the fruit you deliver, he will trade you for 1 of his spicy tofu. Yes, I will be trying to avoid saying the name of that fruit as much as I can from here on out. To get started on this section, you just have to go to the teleporter at the end of the bridge. The teleporter to the wilds is bugged out though, so you'll never actually know where you'll end up when you go there, only that 3 teleporters will be active to take you back. You're tasked with finding as many of the purple fruits as you can and making it back to the ranch to deliver them. This may likely be one of the first times the player is actually in danger of being done in by slimes or the environment, depending on how many upgrades you have. There are lots of long jumps that require the jetpack and big energy tanks, and since every slime you deal with is a feral largo mixed with saber slimes, they will all target you to try to attack you. As you hunt down these purple fruit, you may notice these large nutcrackers and mud balls, which appear to be like a slime toy. By throwing one of these mud balls into the nutcrackers, which Ogden had actually set up, a lot of fruit can be collected at once. One last note as you make your way out with the first haul of purple cheese fruit. While there are no more base saber slimes in existence, you can still bring back saber plorts to make any largo versions of the slimes you'd like. There are 3 stages of rewards you can get from Ogden for reaching certain milestones of fruit deliveries. The first is the garden upgrade that makes it so that any of your fruit or vegetables that land on a garden soil will take significantly longer to rot. The second increases the amount of food a garden is able to produce. These are both upgrades that can be purchased at any garden plort once they are unlocked. The third is access to Ogden's personal ranching area. The barrier will disappear and you can use the plots of land however you would like to. Now in concept and generally speaking, I really enjoy this update. It had everything I asked the developers to work on prior. It's got a new interesting location with its own game style and gimmick, a reason to go there, and new slimes. But the minigame itself can get pretty arduous at times. In essence, gathering Kookadoobas is just an elongated fetch quest with a pretty high requirement to unlock everything. I know that this is supposed to be interwoven with normal gameplay, but the incentive to do so is still lacking. Unlike most of Slime Rancher, you have to put a full stop to your current gameplay to engage with a completely different activity. If the minigame was a bit more compelling, I feel like I could be more optimistic about it, but as it currently stands, the whole of the expansion is what I described on loop. Once you've gotten to grips with the new location, it's just a matter of optimizing a route to get it over with as soon as possible. And if, like myself, you've played through a fair bit of the main game before playing this expansion, you won't really need the extra ranch space. While it is cool, unless you're specifically trying to fill every plot in the game, this extra space will likely remain as it is. The last thing to talk about is Ogden's story. As an additional story, it's simple and enjoyable as an extra bit to unlock with each milestone delivery. Ogden will open up to you over the course of time. When you unlock the first upgrade, he tells you that he used to run a huge company back on Earth that specialized in making instant meals. He didn't enjoy that life though, and he didn't even think of the food they were making for people as food. It's described as cheap meals made of nothing but chemicals and preservatives. The second milestone brings a story of how food became Ogden's passion after he left the company. He admits to being ousted from the company after trying to sabotage it when he learned that they were making people sick. But the company was too big for him to take down, so he moved to the far range and learned to properly take care of himself with real food. When you complete his last task, he thanks you and lets you know that he will continue to trade fruit for tofu, and that it was nice to be able to talk to someone else on the far range. Ultimately, that's really it for Ogden's update. The second content update is probably my favorite, which may surprise those of you who have played the game through considering what I just said. Much like the first update, there are some requirements before the new area can be unlocked. You have to have access to the Indigo Quarry, the Grotto Ranch expansion, and have done a trade request for Mochi Miles. I want to quickly introduce Mochi because even before her expansion came out, she came off as a brat in her Star Mail introduction. She calls you a wannabe rancher and makes a point of introducing herself by her family name, Miles, as in Tatsuya Miles, the billionaire. She is here on special order of her dad, and has special access to the plort market. Maybe if you work hard enough, you can even become second best rancher there, and be known as someone who helped the great Mochi Miles in her conquests. I do actually love this kind of brazen character introduction. I immediately didn't like Mochi, and I love that. Once you've received an invite to the Miles Manor, you can get there via the teleporter in the Grotto expansion. The manor lives up to its name with a beautiful landscape and building to suit. You can't actually go in there yet, but once again across a bridge, you'll find a trade exchange to deal directly with Mochi. She will get to the point quickly, letting you know the area you're in, Nimble Valley, is home to a rare kind of slime called Quicksilver Slimes. She also lets you know that everything here is her property, including the profits from the Quicksilver plorts. She's far too busy to collect the plorts herself though, and wants you to get them for her. Since this area is run by Miles Technology, gameplay here is a bit different, and Mochi will explain that. You'll temporarily get a different backpack while working for her. When you go into the Nimble Valley, you'll have to use a generator to send out an electric pulse which will get the Quicksilver Slimes moving, since they're normally dormant. The slimes eat electricity, and they move really fast. Using the new backpack, you can shoot out sparks of electricity to feed them and get their plorts. Luckily, you don't actually have to retrieve the plorts yourself. The Miles Tech in the area will automatically collect them from wherever you are. Before going off on your first trial, she offers you a cut of the profits for every 10 Quicksilver plorts you get, and once you've reached her first milestone, you'll get the Mochi's Extra Mile, which will randomly double the sale price of one of your plorts at the plort market. This section feels and plays much more like a minigame than Ogden's. There are 2 areas in Nimble Valley for you to chase down Quicksilver Slimes. Each one is laid out similarly to a racetrack, with a couple of different routes to go down. Once you press the big button to start the generator, a timer counts down and the race is on. The slimes will spawn and begin racing around the track in a circle. You can run and jetpack yourself around to collect shots to feed the slimes, powerful bonus shots, and relay rings which extend the amount of time the generator will go for, letting you collect more plorts. I really enjoy this gameplay. It's very simple and allows for some creative play. You want to hit as many slimes as you can, and each slime can be hit more than once after a short period. The Quicksilver Slimes also look really cool. The standard shots you get can actually hit more than one slime if they're super close, but generally act as single shots. There are 3 different types of bonus shots you can get. The Thunderclap is a wide area of effect shot that will hit grouped slimes. The Static Clinger will create a field around any slimes it hits, which will feed any slimes that it comes across for a short period of time. Finally, the Slow Field is the most powerful, giving 3 shots which can create large bubbles that bring any slimes that enter it to a crawl, allowing you to feed a lot of slimes really quickly. If you strategically place these slow fields, you can accumulate a massive amount of slimes and easily feed them. The mixture of first-person shooter and racing gameplay is a lot of fun, and since it's limited to a couple of minutes, it always feels tense, without overstaying its welcome. I find myself excited to get to the second track just to have another chance to get more plorts and do better than my last score. Because it's short and limited, I think it's easier to be left wanting more, which is significantly better than the issue at Ogden's farm where it felt like it dragged out for too long on every adventure. Shockingly, that's pretty much everything. The whole minigame is short, the areas are well designed, and the gameplay is fun. I was asking for new areas and slimes before, but this isn't how I originally imagined it. Comparing the two though, I much prefer this one to Ogden's gameplay. This is short, concise, enjoyable, with clear quantifiable goals and rewards. Ogden's tofu is useful, but not so much as to have me wanting to fetch any more fruit for him. A simple cash reward is just as engaging and more useful. I feel like I can compare it to when an employer gives you a gift card to some random place and you're like, can I just have this in cash instead? Similarly, Mochi's story is much more engaging, even though it's arguably more cliché. Mochi was sent to the far range by her father to get the business on the frontier profitable. Through her initial interactions, we see her play into her family name and station, as well as talking down to Beatrix at every opportunity. She comes off as pretentious and arrogant, and her artwork reflects her perfectly. Once you've finished her first task, she reacts with surprise that you followed through on your end. After giving you your reward, she tells you that if you want to make it on the far range, you have to do it on your own. No one can help you from back on Earth. After opening up to you, she quickly retreats to insulting you and bringing up her father's achievements. For the second set of rewards, she offers you a deluxe upgrade to your chicken coops. Once again, she's surprised that you came through. Here, Mochi finally compliments you, noting that you seem to be able to handle yourself. She tells you that this whole planet feels like a chicken coop, a pen to keep her out of the way so her dad didn't have to have her underfoot while he was working. She ends up describing herself as a chicken in that coop. At the end, she lashes out at her unmasked feelings, with an insult to Beatrix and offering one last milestone, the manor itself, much like with Ogden's retreat. The final time you complete one of her tasks, she opens up completely to Beatrix. She even says that she may come and visit you sometime, and that she appreciated working with you. She claims that she will build an empire even larger than her father's, and that maybe this time she'll be doing it just for herself. Her send-off is much more confident, telling you that you both have work to do, and that she'll still buy the Quicksilver plorts off of you. If you talk to her again afterwards, she will start to order you to work before changing her tone and saying it would be a big help if you could collect more for her. Though this is by all means a short and cliché story of a girl coming to accept her own value outside of the family name, and coming to terms with her own emotions instead of lashing out so much, I felt so much more invested in Mochi's story. For one thing, it felt like we were having a direct effect on how it was turning out. I could easily imagine Beatrix's responses and the cute back and forth the two would have. In my own little headcanon, I always like to imagine that Mochi and Beatrix got into business together or ended up as romantic partners. It's really easy for me to do this. You get clear insight into Mochi's life in the short time you have together, and much like the minigame associated with her, it's great. Though I wanted more from this story, it's more akin to not wanting a book or show you've been watching to end, rather than thinking it wasn't enough as it was. The most recent update to Slime Rancher was Viktor's experimental update. The requirements here are a bit higher, requiring both the Ancient Ruins and the Treasure Cracker Mark II to be unlocked. Once you've done his trader quest, a portal will open up in the Slime Lab, which will take you to Viktor's lab. Viktor's update is a happy medium between Ogden and Mochi, potentially leaning more towards Mochi's update. It's likewise fun, goal-oriented, and concise. Honestly, when comparing the two, Viktor's minigame is likely more engaging than Mochi's in certain respects. For me, it was a far closer second than Ogden's. In Viktor's lab, there are 4 storage slots that you can use to swap out your inventories between your normal stuff and stuff related to the content update. Viktor is a scientist, and he is enlisting Beatrix to help him with his latest project, the Slimulation. He has gone through the effort of reproducing the Far Far Range as a digital simulation in an attempt to predict slime behaviors and evolution. He notes that the simulation was riddled with a sort of software bug that has taken on the guise of a slime and is capable of reproducing. These slimes are called glitch slimes and have the ability to transform to fit their surroundings, something that he muses may be an attempt to hide from him. You're told that the slimes will appear as normal slimes or as largos as well, but with something just slightly off about them. If you vac them up, they will turn into bug reports for you to turn into Viktor. For the ones that have camouflaged themselves, you'll have to hit them with the debug spray, which you can acquire in the simulation and takes the place of the water in your tank. The last thing is that due to a data corruption, after a period of time, tar-like entities will take over the slimulation and you will have to get out right away. He will set up beacons to guide you to the exit teleporter when that happens. If you talk to him again, he will debrief you in a way that cutely shows off his awkward nature. The gameplay of the minigame is pretty fun. You'll enter a simplified version of the Far Far Range, where the Dry Reef, Indigo Quarry, and Moss Blankets are all linked together with digital blocks. As you go through, you'll find slimes that have a simple face instead of the normally expressive one. When they are vacked up, they turn into glitch slimes that you have to catch. The same happens with largos. Around the map are pieces of the terrain that fit in with the environment but are not quite where they're supposed to be. When you get close to them, they'll wiggle, revealing themselves to be the camouflaged glitch slimes. If you have the debug spray on you, you can spray the environmental piece and it will erupt into many glitch slimes. Once you've spent enough time in the slimulation, the tars will begin to spawn through growing portals that appear everywhere. The portals and tars will begin to take over the slimulation, and if you come in contact with either, you will take damage and lose some of your bug reports. You can keep playing for quite a while after the invasion, and it's relatively easy to cap your bug reports, so once you're ready, you chase down the exit gate and the minigame is over. Handing in bug reports will get you manifold cubes, which you can use for more advanced gadgets that were added in this content update. These rewards can be found in treasure pods in the Slimulation and the milestone rewards for completing Viktor's tasks. The final reward is, of course, access to Viktor's ranch expansion. The other two are a chicken cloner, which works half of the time, and an advanced drone schematic. The chicken cloner is a bit of a joke item with some lore behind it, but may potentially help Papa Gordo if you're lucky, though raising them is especially easy if you have Mochi's upgrades. The advanced drone is far more useful, because unlike the standard drones, you are able to give them 2 tasks to complete instead of the usual 1. Viktor's story follows the same progression as the 2 beforehand. It takes the outsider's story from Ogden, someone who has a problem of their own that they have to deal with, which the player doesn't have a real effect on, and the emotional beats from Mochi, with us having a direct effect in changing Viktor's life rather than just being a bystander. Viktor comes across as a confident, if awkward person. He cracks jokes that don't really land, and he tends to keep to himself. He isn't condescending like Mochi, he just clearly doesn't understand how to interact with other people the way he would like to. After completing his first request, he introduces you to his scientific partner, Bob. It feels natural that his only friend and partner on the far, far range would be a group of pink slimes in a trench coat. When asked if he ever actually met Bob, he admits that he hasn't, and that he tends to just live most of his life through his simulations, including relationships. His views on relationships are somewhat jaded. He notes that it's a waste to build a friendship that ends or a romantic interest who leaves you. He's trying to find a way to simulate his best life and compute the most optimal way to live. He even tells you that he ran a simulation on your performance, though the simulation performed worse than you did. When you complete the second task, Viktor appears more distraught than pleased. You outperformed his simulation again. Now he reflects and wonders if more of his simulations were wrong, even if they did benefit him. He worries to himself for most of the conversation, and it comes across as genuine with his artwork reflecting this. Once again, he forgets to say goodbye at the end. After the third trade, he seems more at peace and generally happy. Your hard work has paid off, and it helped him isolate the glitch that was creating the glitch slimes, but he's come to a personal revelation because of you. He wasn't prepared for how much you'd be willing to help him. Your kindness and tenacity proved his simulations wrong, and it helped him realize there is value in the things we aren't able to predict, including other people. He's decided to keep the glitch slimes alive in this slimulation. It may not be a perfect simulation of the far, far range, but it has its own value because it's so different. He finishes the conversation by asking you to stay in touch, and just talk about whatever. If you call him after this, you can see how his more positive outlook is going in life. He's put in the effort to reconnect with one of his old partners. Though they have little in common and disagree scientifically, they share the same taste in music, and that's enough for him. To me, Slime Rancher is a game about connections. Though it's easy to take the game at face value of just ranching slimes because they're cute and getting more money for bigger numbers, I think that there's a lot more there for people who want to look for it. More importantly, I think that what is there is worth the time and effort. Ogden has a story about developing a connection with oneself, learning to take care of himself, leaving a toxic situation behind to get to know himself better. Viktor's story is one of reconnection. After isolating himself and believing that he could avoid putting his feelings on the line, he's learned that people can surprise you. He came to the conclusion that it's worth it to develop these connections, even if they may come to an end. Mochi made her first steps towards healthier relationships with people, both with herself and Beatrix. She's decided that letting go of her one-sided relationship with her father and focusing on her own pursuits is more important, and that the people you meet along the way can be just as important. Her connection with Beatrix was a milestone for her progress. Thora and Hobson are a story about how meeting someone can change your life. Hobson learned that it can be worth it to make someone else the center of your life. In contrast to Beatrix, he chose to give up his ambitions of traveling the stars because he met someone who changed his attitude. For him, she became his passion and ambition. Beatrix and Casey had to give up on their relationship in order to chase their goals and dreams. It's not a bad thing, it's simply part of life that some of our connections will come to an end. They made a hard decision that was in their best interests. Though they stayed in touch for a while, eventually it did have to come to an end. They would both move on to make new friends and partners, but their time together was over. And finally, there's your connection. You're connected to the world that you've spent hours exploring, the gadgets you've tinkered with, and the ranch you've built up. You're connected to the slimes that you've raised and helped evolve. Even if you've had to let some go or throw them into the ocean, they went out to continue their lives however it went. It may sound pretentious, but if you've built up a ranch you're truly proud of, full of largos you made, you don't want them to escape or be eaten by tars. Even though it's simple and the slimes are virtual, the connection is still there. One day, you will close the game and never open it again. But even though it was fleeting, you could still have gotten a lot out of your short time with these characters and slimes. Or maybe I'm just invested because I wrote a 15,000 word essay discussing a game about ranching slimes. There isn't really much left to say about Slime Rancher. I've left in a bunch of little secrets that can be found around the world in gadgets or treasure pods out of the essay for you to go and find if you'd like. I think you'd likely enjoy it if you stuck around this far. I also didn't address the rush mode at all. It's a shortish minigame where you make as much money as you can in 3 in-game days. All the areas are unlocked and it can be fun for a while, but it's outside the main game, having to be accessed from the main menu. In terms of gameplay, I feel like my overall opinions are pretty clear. It's a lot of fun to just mosey about in the far range, and it really can be compelling to try to make an automated, profitable ranch. The added content are really good for the most part, though Ogden's drags out for too long, Viktor's can do so as well to a lesser degree. They all end conclusively, and while there's an argument for having absolutely no need to go back to any of the minigames, I think it's well designed to have it available for anyone who'd like to do it again, but not have a bottomless time sink that detracts from the rest of the game. Some last notes for those who may be interested. My favorite base slime is the water slime, it's just way too cute. My favorite Largo is the Honey Hunter Largo, Fight Me. The jetpack was also the single greatest addition to the game, hands down, no question asked. Free movement and a map that accommodates that is brilliant and extremely hard to pull off. You actually can capture golden lucky slimes by putting them on a slime pedestal. I had a golden slime, but it got away. I almost caught a lucky slime once, but I accidentally launched it into the sky.
No, I didn't.
My favorite piece of music in the game is likely the Ancient Ruins Courtyard theme, or any of the nighttime themes. I streamed all of the video taken in this essay. It took about 21.5 hours. To those of you who joined into our little community, welcome. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.